Welcome back, everyone. Attorney Craig Steger here, practicing in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. A little different format today with the show, so we're live here. The plan will be to be live pretty much every morning, probably including weekends, at about 5:30 a.m. Central Time. I had been live streaming most weekday afternoons around 4:30 p.m. Central Time, but because of just difficulties and conflicts that always come up at the end of the day, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to move it to the morning. Few people mess with my schedule before 7 o'clock a.m. So this is going to be the new time for a while. I don't expect a lot of people to spend their morning coffee listening to a lawyer ramble on, but if you're interested, I'll be here and you can hop on at any time and ask questions, comments, shoot the breeze, whatever you want to do. So I have about 20 minutes today. So today, what I wanted to talk about, and should be clear from the title, is this is a case I'd been following for a little while. It's in Georgia, and Ford was hit with a huge, well, both a personal injury lawsuit and a punitive damage lawsuit, and they got hit with a 2.5 billion. That's right, billion with a B lawsuit, a punitive damage claim the other day in Georgia over a products liability claim. And so let me show you, and this I think was probably the thumbnail. So let me show you this picture here. So the lawsuit involves let's see, what year is the truck? Da, 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 da. Mhm, mhm. I thought I knew this. Early 2000s, I think. It's a Ford F-250 Super Duty, and a couple was driving, and it's not clear that I've seen so far whether this was associated with another accident or whether they just rolled over. But a husband and wife were in it, and they were both killed. And you can see here from the picture, the when it rolled over, the roof collapsed in on it, and they both died as a result of it. And so this lawsuit was what we call a products liability lawsuit. Products liability lawsuit means that you're not really suing an individual for negligence, although you could also be doing that, right? This lawsuit could have included a claim against another driver if they caused them to roll over, if this was associated with another crash. But it doesn't even have to be associated with another crash. The accident could have been entirely the driver's fault of whoever was driving this vehicle. Um, doesn't matter, a products liability claim, whether you were at fault or someone else is at fault. The concept being is that the vehicle itself was unreasonably dangerous. Now that could mean a lot of things. Could mean that they designed it wrong, and that's probably the most common type of products liability claim. Is a claim that they simply made a poor design, left something out, uh, didn't do enough testing to anticipate reasonable uses. So, like, no one wants their vehicle to roll over, but it's foreseeable that it's going to happen, right? And so the idea being that the manufacturers need to incorporate the fact that vehicle rollovers will happen, and it shouldn't be a death sentence if it does. So there's been changes in legislation and federal rules over time as to what is required, what a vehicle manufacturer must be able to do and improve in terms of the structural integrity of the vehicle, the cab, um, in the event of a rollover accident, similar to how they'll have similar standards for what's permissible cab intrusion in the case of a side impact, head on, rear end, things like that. And so this couple sued Ford initially um, for damages caused by products liability, and I believe, and I'm just looking here. Um, so the jury found 85% of the Ford's fault, and it did assign 15% to Deborah let's see, one of the passengers. So they must have assigned some fault to the driver. I'm not entirely sure how that works. Different states are going to have different rules when you're talking about products liability and comparative fault. But for our purposes, the majority of the fault fell on Ford. And so this was a bifurcated lawsuit trial. What do we mean by bifurcated? It was actually tried in two different phases. I believe the same jury would have heard both trials, but the first one was simply to determine in the first place whether the truck was unreasonably dangerous, which is the typical standard for products liability. And they succeeded in that. They got the jury to award compensatory damages of like 30 million in the initial trial. And that was a claim brought by their three children, three surviving children, I believe. So there was an initial trial um, to go over the question of whether Ford should be liable in the first place for products liability in the plaintiffs. So the family of the injured, the deceased couple, prevailed on that. Once they prevailed on that, they believed they had additional evidence to support a punitive damage claim against Ford. And let me explain why the trials might be separated. So and it'll be kind of obvious here in a second. Sometimes there's evidence that's relevant to a claim of punitive damages that would not necessarily be relevant to the underlying claim of fault or products liability, for the very reason that it can be very inflammatory. Evidence of what the corporation knew or didn't know ahead of time, things they did to, hide evidence, wealth, things like that, um, is generally excluded from the initial trial that established liability and damages, but is completely fair game in a separate. And since it's impossible to segregate out that evidence between those two claims in front of the jury, they simply bifurcate. So they'll have an initial case on liability, and if the plaintiffs succeed on that, and if there is evidence to support it, they'll move on to a second trial for punitive damages where all the dirty laundry comes out. And boy, was there dirty laundry in this case. So the basis for the punitive damage case was this. They said that Ford had known, this is, I think, the plaintiff's lawyer team said that Ford had known for 26 years that people were getting hurt or killed as a result of these weak cabs. And what really, I think, probably sunk Ford is they claim that an internal Ford engineering team had actually developed a stronger roof design in 2006, but they chose not to implement it. And I'll talk a little bit for those of you old enough to remember the Ford Pinto. You'll know what I'm talking about, and I'm going to explain that in a second. So they had, so internally they had documents to prove that Ford was aware of this issue and had actually come up with a better design and chose for various reasons not to use it, right? So then, and then what Ford actually did is they lobbied the feds to avoid imposing a higher standard for these kinds of trucks for roof integrity. And then finally, Ford started introducing the heavier roofs in 2017, which means that from about 2006 to 2017, so about 10, 11 years, Ford had a better design, and they specifically chose not to implement it, possibly for cost reasons or whatever. I don't really know. And one of the arguments that Ford claimed was, well, we don't really need to do the heavier roof because when people are in a rollover, they just duck down below their seats, which I don't know, maybe, but that doesn't guarantee anything. And for those that don't, it's a really bad deal if the roof crumples in on you. So, and so they really hammered Ford because it was aware of the problem, had the ability to fix the problem, and chose not to. And that's why there is a punitive damage claim here in addition to the underlying liability damages of $30 million. And so why punitive damages? Why give this family all this extra money? Because the theory being, without a huge financial impact, companies won't do anything, and they don't. And in fact, Ford has kind of a notorious history of not doing things. And so I want to talk to you just briefly about the Ford Pinto. So I'm going to put the Ford Pinto on the screen. I almost bought a Ford Pinto when I was in high school, and thank God I didn't. So if you look here, the notorious Ford Pinto was a hatchback in the 70s, I think. And you can see here, you can see the gas cap on the side here. And then what happened with these vehicles is Ford had placed the gas tank between the rear axle and the bumper of the car, right? And so anytime someone got in a rear end accident, if you were in a Pinto doing nothing wrong yourself and you got rear-ended, there was a higher likelihood that gas tank was going to be ruptured and a fire was going to ensue. And there was a lot of people that burned to death in these damn vehicles over time. And what happened to Ford, and they got hit with a huge punitive damage award, which makes this case involving the Super Duty all the more perplexing because they had been through this before, is what sunk Ford back in the, I don't know, maybe the 80s, is there was internal documents showing Ford was aware of the problem. Sound familiar? They were aware of the problem, had a solution, but concluded that it would be cheaper to pay damages for people injured or burnt to death in these fires than to retrofit all these cars. So they did a simple economic analysis and concluded it would save Ford money if they just paid families of people that were killed in these things than to fix the car, fix the design. And so that's the notorious story of Ford and the Ford Pinto. And then so the punitive damages are, we don't want companies doing that. We don't want them using financial reasons to avoid doing things that can save people's lives. So that was the Ford Pinto. Most of you probably weren't around for that. But it sounds like Ford continues to be kind of a bad actor in that respect. So I thought that was very interesting that Ford is still getting itself in trouble for that. So if I get more information about that, I'll post that in further videos. I do have some videos coming out on my other channel, specifically talking about products liability, because it is a little different type of case. I'll link to those in the description when those videos are available. If you want, you can go over and check that out. And I have a lot more information on products liability claims. So anyway, yeah, that's all I wanted to show with you guys today. Appreciate you watching. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions or thoughts, reactions to that. If you need to reach out to me, just go down to the description and there's a way you can get on my calendar and we can book a call. Otherwise, appreciate you watching. And until next time, everyone, have a good one.